Going back to your travels in Mongolia, I wanted to highlight a specific story here that I thought was really fascinating. One morning you wake up and for some curious reason your forearm has begun to swell and it's so painful that you can't even hold your bowl of tea, which as a, tea drinker like yourself, that's a problem. Fortunately, one of your companions though suggested a visit to a local shaman, a woman who was 103 years old. I'd love if you could tell us and our listeners about that experience and how she treated you, because I thought it was absolutely fascinating the results she was able to get in such short order.
You're absolutely right. It was amazing, and I remember it clearly to this day. As you said, the arm had swollen up between my wristwatch and my elbow. I hadn't fallen off a horse. I hadn't been bitten by a tick. It had just swollen. And I'm a tea drinker. Probably from my accent, you might realize that.
Right.
I'm born in Kenya, where they grow a lot of tea. And my wife being born in India. So, there we are.
Yeah.
And it was very sore. I can't function. You're right about not being able to hold my bowl of tea. They serve tea in bowls there. So our translator, Bayamba, took me to Soyan, who's 103, in her teepee structure. She's living on her own. And in that culture, you can't point your feet at anybody. Absolutely not on. And I'd had serious problems with a knee. I'd had to have some surgery on it. So I couldn't bend my knee and squat. Never mind the fact that I was 60-something at the time.
Yeah.
So, this lady with white cataracts, not just a minor cataract, but actually the whole eye was white. She couldn't see a darn thing, but she could obviously hear really well. After I struggled for a moment, she said, if that man has a bad knee, it doesn't matter. He can sit down with his knee pointed, his leg pointed.
So, crazy. To be so tuned in.
Absolutely. Well, I guess a lot of people, when they've lost their sight or never had sight, are totally tuned in with their hearing. They have to be.
Yeah.
So we talk a bit about my arm, and she says, well, come over and sit next to me. And I'm on the opposite side of the teepee, so I'm what? I don't know, more than 10 feet, maybe 15, 18 feet away from her. And I go over and she palpates my arm. She runs her arm up and down it, not for very long. And she asks a couple of questions from Biamba. And then she reaches behind me, behind herself, and pulls out this great big leaf. It's probably a foot long and 9 or 10 inches wide. It's a fleshy leaf, fleshier than a cabbage leaf. It's, you can sort of squash it. And says, right, wrap this, heat it up on a stove and wrap your arm in it, heat it up 3 or 4 times during the night and see what happens. Well, being a veterinarian, I had some bandaging material, so it made it a lot easier. It wouldn't fall off. So we put it on the stove, wrapped it around the arm, put the bandage on, lovely purple color. You'll see the photographs actually in the book. There are 62 photos in this book, which is delightful.
They were wonderful.
Well, loved it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I wrap this stuff, and 2 or 3 times during the night, I wake up and we put the leaf back on the stove and wrap it again. By morning, the swelling's gone. Amazing.
Yeah.
And no pain. I could pick up my bowl of tea, again, very important in my life.
Yeah.
And so I say to Biamba, let's go back and thank the old lady. We do. And because I guess the link with the families, my wife's a physician, my son's a physician, I'm a veterinarian. Turns out Soyan, this old lady, is a shaman. Her daughter is a shaman. And her grandson is one of our veterinary technicians. You've just referred to his name, Gamba.
Mm-hmm.
So we have very similar families. 2 medical folks and a veterinary person, a man in both cases.
Yeah.
She was delighted with that story, I think. Certainly Biamba was amazed. So we go, and she lets me sit next to her, and Biamba takes a photograph.
That's quite an honor.
Oh, something else. And sadly, 103, she died that winter. So that may have been the last photograph ever taken of her. We don't know.
Wow. The alignment there is incredible.
Isn't it just?
Yeah. It's really wild. And just that the fact that treatment worked so quickly and worked so effectively. We are so used to pills and ointments and incredibly processed medication. For her to take this to take, one look at you and know what natural remedy would provide such an efficient solution. It's incredible wisdom on her part.
Fantastic. There's an extra little adjunct to that, which I got quite disturbed about later. I was lecturing on that story to my veterinary students, and one of them, who clearly wasn't thinking, said from the back of the room, "You mean you equate her to a doctor?" Looked at him for a moment, and I said, "We're in a culture where, yes, she's the doctor, she's the important, and her daughter. There are vitally important medical people in that culture." I think I silenced him.
Yeah, sounds like it.
The sad thing is that all these indigenous cultures, I mean, they're slowly they're leaving our earth with every day. And, these are the people that honor our earth, honor our animals, honor our plants. And a lot of them have oral traditions, or they have these shamanic traditions that my fear is that once they're gone, who today is going to keep those traditions alive?
I fully agree with you. And if we think of one really spooky example that's going on in Brazil right now, what drugs they've developed in those forests, we don't know. The cultures are being destroyed by that Bolsonaro. Again, I can't use the right word.
Yeah.
Let's just say character.
That's okay. That's a safe term. And what antibiotics, what fever-reducing drugs are in those forests that will never be developed because there's no profit margin. You put them in some high-profile commercial lab, they can't even, it'd be a waste of time and they'd lose money. But like I say, Jim, that, boy, we are losing stuff.
Yeah, that's why it's important to talk about their cultures and talk about the powers that they have so that we can at least keep their oral tradition alive and at least keep some of their spirit alive within us and our future generations, because we owe it to them. I mean, we owe it to our ancestors and we owe it to our future descendants.